Hey everyone, it's Carrie Lynn here, and welcome back to Life on the Reds. And so I want to do sort of a series of some, strange and unexplainable stories. Like, you can't really logically explain what happened. And these are true stories. Things that happened to me and my family. And so growing up on a Indian reservation, there's a lot of superstition, and maybe other natives out there could relate to this. But also, growing up as a Christian, and my dad being a pastor now, he's been a pastor probably over 60 years. So I grew up with Christianity too. So for me, I didn't get too much into the superstition, but it was around me all the time. So the stories I'm going to tell are stories that I just can't explain. I can't find a logical explanation. And some of them are a bit creepy. So I'm going to do this series of these 4 stories and just see if it's something that you like and want to listen to, because I have a lot more stories that I could share. And these stories have stayed with me a lifetime. They're stories that don't fit neatly into what we think or we know about the world. Maybe you've experienced something yourself, a strange coincidence, a dream that felt too real, a voice you couldn't explain, or even an event that happened exactly how someone imagined it, like a deja vu or something. And sometimes people kind of brush these aside because they just can't explain it. And because there's no logical explanation, it's just something that leaves us wondering. For the rest of our lives, we kind of wonder, what happened? And so I'm going to get into one of those stories. Have you ever wanted something so badly that you couldn't stop thinking about it? So badly that it followed you into your dreams. What if those thoughts didn't stay in your dreams? What if somehow they became real? That's what this story's about. See, this was years ago when I was a young child, and I would say I was about maybe 8 to 10 years old. And I was staying with my grandma, and we stayed in the same community, so her house wasn't very far from our house. It was just walking distance. So me and my brother, we stayed a lot of times at her house. And my uncle, his name was Clayton, he stayed there too. And he was already an adult, but he stayed there and kind of helped take care of things for my grandma. But he would also sometimes drink, and he would, head out and get drunk, and so that was kind of something my grandma and I guess the rest of us knew when he was gone, that he probably went and got drunk. So me and my grandma, we're at home, we go to bed, and I'm sleeping with my grandma, and we're just kind of about ready to close our eyes and start to fall asleep. And this is close to midnight. So we hear somebody come up on the porch, and they knock on the porch or on the door. And they do this familiar knock that my uncle always does. So my uncle, when he would come to the door and come visiting or whatever, he had this certain knock, and it was kind of like this. And so he done that. So we knew automatically, we knew it was Clayton. And then my grandma says, but we're not going to open it. That's Clayton. She said, we're not going to open it because he might be drinking. And so we just kind of laid there quiet. Then we could hear him kind of standing and moving around on the porch. Then pretty soon we heard him walk off the porch and he left. So a few minutes later we fell asleep. And then the next day we got up, and my grandma, she's cooking breakfast, and I'm sitting at the table, and we're just kind of visiting and talking. And then Clayton shows up, and he comes in, and my grandma tells him, oh, where did you sleep last night? And Clayton said, oh, I stayed at my cousin's house in town. He said, I slept there. And then this morning, he said, I hitched a ride out here. And so where my grandma lived was about 7 miles from town, the little community called Star School. And so, he hitched a ride out because it was kind of a distance, 7 miles. So he came out and he was getting coffee, and he sat down and he said, I had the strangest dream. He said, it was so real. He said, I can't explain it, but it was just such a real dream to me. He said, everything in there was so real. The colors, everything. He said, and last night, he said, I wanted to come home. He said, and I just really wanted to be home. He said, and I told my cousin, I think I'm just going to hitchhike home and head out to Star School. He said, my cousin said, you better not. You better just stay because it's already dark. It's late. There might not be any cars on the road and you might not get a ride. Just sleep here and you can head home tomorrow. And he said, so I decided to sleep. He said, even though, he said, my heart was just really wanting to be home. And he said, so I fell asleep. He said, I had this dream. He said, I had this dream that I came out. And he said, I came up on the porch. He said, and I thought, it's really late, so I'm going to do my knock just to let them know that it's me that's at the door. He said, so I did my little knock. He said, I did my little knock to let you guys know it was me. He said, but nobody came to the door. He said, so I was standing there. He said, I was thinking. He said, I thought, I bet you they think I'm drinking. That's why they won't open the door. He said, so I thought, well, I think I'll head down to the cabin. So my grandma had this little cabin at the east end of Star School. And she was living there for a while before she moved back to her house. So they still had some things in that little cabin, like, bed and table and different things there. So my uncle thought, I'll just go down there and, sleep at the cabin, and then I'll come up in the morning. He said, so I walk off the porch. He said, I'm just walking down towards the cabin, and I wake up. He said, and when I woke up, he said that desire was still there, that I just wish I was home. I wish this wasn't a dream. He said, but I made it through the night, got up. He said, and the first thing I did is when I got up, he said, is just, I'm going to head home. I'm going to hitchhike home. And me and my grandma, while he's telling us this dream, we're kind of looking at each other because we know what we heard. And I didn't know how to put it into words. I didn't know how to say it. So I'm just looking at my grandma. And my grandma says, "You did come. You came here last night. We heard you when you came up on the porch. We heard your knock." She said, "And that's exactly what we thought. We thought you were drinking, so we didn't open the door." And he looked at us and his eyes got big. And it was something that none of us could explain. And that incident always stuck with me. I always wondered what happened. And later years, as I became an adult and I grew up, I was thinking about that story, and I thought, I wonder if he was so wanting to be home that his spirit actually left and headed to Star School, and all of what we heard was his spirit that came on the porch, that knocked, and that's what we were hearing. And then his spirit went back, came back to him, and that wasn't a real dream. It was just his spirit leaving and coming back. So that was kind of a theory that I kind of came up with, but really, I really don't know what happened. I really can't explain what happened that night. Have you ever had an experience like this? Has anything ever happened to you or maybe another family member that you can't explain? You heard somebody knocking on the door, but they weren't really there. If you have had an experience, drop it in the comments. I'd like to hear your story. I think these are fascinating. I think things like this that happen in our lives, I just think they're a little unsettling, but yet they're also fascinating. And I often think of this story. My grandma, she passed away in 2009, and my uncle passed away maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. So they're both gone, but that story always sticks with me. And all three of us never forgot it. And even though I was just a child at the time, I remember the story clear as day, because it left a impact on me, because I could never explain it. To me, this story really blurs the line between dreams, spirits, and reality. And so, if you enjoyed this story, stay tuned for the next one, because all of these stories are real. They're real experiences that happen. They're not campfire stories. They're not something that was made up and dramatized or anything like that. They're real life stories that happened to me and my family. So stay tuned for the next one, and please like, subscribe if you like hearing stories like this that are unexplainable, that are strange, that are a bit unsettling. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.